Welcome to our R&D Executive Panel. I'm Taryn Grome, editor and co-founder of PharmaVOICE. Marie Curie, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist, once said, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we can fear less." What an apropos quote, given the time in which we are all living. And it's especially significant for our next panel of industry leaders who span the research and development spectrum of healthcare, and whom all are creating understanding out of what can be fearful circumstances for patients who are in need of cures, which is their life's passion. And they are also fearless. Joining me for this afternoon for the first of our two afternoon sessions are Peyton Howell, Executive VP and Chief Commercial and Strategy Officer at Parexel, Beenu Kapoor, VP IT Trial Management, Products Lead, IQVIA, Kellie Malloy Foerter, Vice President, Global Clinical Trials, Strategy and Operations, NRDG and ISR at Bristol Myers Squibb, and Dr. Lindsay McNair, Chief Medical Officer at WCG. Welcome, ladies. Also, a reminder to our audience that all of our panelists' bios can be found on the event tab. During the next 45 minutes or so, we are going to explore a number of topics, including their passion for patients and how they are improving the patient experience, how they maintain equilibrium, because as we know, R&D is fraught with ups and downs, some of the top trends they're tracking, and of course, their wow moments that shape their career. Before we kick off the conversation, I've asked each of our amazing panelists to describe their leadership journey in 1 to 2 words with a quick explanation as to why. So I'm going to ask Peyton Howell to kick us off. Peyton, if you could take yourself off of mute. Hi, how are you?
Great. Thanks, Taryn. What a great way to do introductions. I think my 2 words for my leadership style would be purpose-driven. And I think it's been the common thread for me throughout my career has been the patient and patient access to care. But I think how I show up would be that passion, that energy, and really trying to be my authentic self. I think as I've actually gotten older in my career, that's actually been easier to do and just show the care and empathy for my team. So purpose-driven, which I think we're all very fortunate to be so directly connected to patients. I do think it is an advantage in terms of really being able to live that every day.
Agreed. It's easy to be patient or purpose-driven when you're working towards that greater mission. So
exactly.
That's awesome. Beenu, I'm going to jump to you next.
Absolutely. And from my perspective, I think I'm a leader and a team player at the same time. I inspire my team by my action-oriented approach and do not expect my team to do anything that I'm not ready to achieve myself. I personally try to leverage a team of knowledge workers because I believe that the collective wisdom of the team is greater than some of its parts.
Excellent. And I think I was negligent in introducing Kinnari Patel. I think I left her off my my introduction, so my apology. But Kinnari is the newly named president and retaining her old title also of Chief Operating Officer of Rocket Pharma. So Kinnari, I'm going to ask you to jump in, and my apologies.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me participate in the panel. My 2 North Star has really been passion. I love what I do, and I feel very fortunate that I found my passion early in my career. And the second is continuous learning. I'm always trying to learn from everyone around me and constantly trying to grow myself and help the team around us grow. So to me, I think that's what's distinguished the ability to be my best is continuously try to grow and become better at it.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll jump to you, Lindsay.
So it was hard to come up with a single word for this, but I think my style would be explanatory. I tend to explain quite a bit the rationale of why we're doing things to help people buy into decisions. And I've done that all the way since back when I was practicing medicine, when I would write orders in a chart and then go find the nurse and say, here's why we're changing this plan and here's what we're doing. And it feels to me like when you explain to people the rationale for why you've made a decision or why you're doing what you're doing, it really increases buy-in and helps people to all stay moving the same direction.
I love that explanatory. I don't know that I've ever had anybody give me that word. That That is very unique. I love that. And so rounding us out, Kellie.
Thanks, Taryn, and thank you to this entire panel and to PharmaVOICE. I just really appreciate the forum that we have. And I think as I look at my leadership, I look at it as engaged and caring. And I think it's really being present for my teams and for our initiatives, and focused with patients at the top of everything we do. That mission, vision, and purpose that we've all talked about here, I think is absolutely critical. So that caring carries through not just for the individuals we're working with, but those we're working to support.
That's wonderful. And I do think that that's the common thread through all 5 of you and all of your journeys, is that passion that you have for patients. And we were talking before we got on that the 5 of you had not yet met. And I find that extraordinary, considering where you all are in your careers and how much you have given to the healthcare and the life sciences industry. So I'm so glad that we're able to convene you in this brain trust together today. Kinnari, I'm going to kick it off with you, and let's talk about the patient and the passion you have for patients and how you're engaging patients. I know you have a particular focus in that rare disease space, which is really quite a unique kind of community when we talk about the general patient population. So talk to me about your work with patients.
At Rocket Pharma and the work previous to my joining Rocket Pharma has always been about rare disease, because there are over 7,000 rare diseases identified to date, and only about 5% of them have therapeutic option. So I think we have so much more to do, and it's like an iceberg. We've done the tip of it, and we really need to do a lot more there. So everything at Rocket Pharma is really around patients, drug development efficiencies, and having an embedment of understanding and making a difference in lives of humanity, right? So our focus has been on rare diseases, and I am very excited to let you know that this Sunday was a Rare Disease Day, February 28th. Tends to be February 29th, the rarest day of the month. This year, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we couldn't do in-person event that we normally do. Last year, we had it at Carnegie Hall with art, science, and music coming together to treat a patient as a whole. This year, we decided to make it a month-long celebration and make a challenge into an opportunity. So we were able to get patients, patient advocacy groups, KOLs, and researchers from Europe, US, and around the world join us. And the 4 panels we did was we kicked off the month by learning from Abby Myers. As some of you may know, Abby Myers is an amazing, motivating person. And in the 1983, she actually was the force, a mom that started the Orphan Drug Act in the US, and that became global. She also was a person that founded the NORD organization, National Organization for Rare Disease. So we were so lucky that she spent an hour with our team and all of the individuals that joined us to talk about how she was so creative to move mountains and do what she did for her son as a motivator, but bringing the community and the entire US, including the Congress, together. And then later on during the month, we ended up doing different sessions on genetic testing, importance of that. If patients were participating in clinical trials, what do they need to know, especially in gene therapy arena? And then we ended the month by talking about advocacies. How do you help patients go from a N of 1 family or 2 or 3 or few families to bring in a community of advocacy group together? So it was a great event, and we ended it with an exclamation mark of lighting up for rare diseases. So we partnered with NORD and around the world to have about 150 monuments lit up around the world, including Rocket Pharma worked on 35 monuments, Empire State Building, Niagara Falls. And yes, I'm an Eagles fan, you could see behind me. So we even changed the Giant and Eagle stadiums to change colors for Rare Disease Day. So these are some of the things we do on a Rare Disease Month or Day. But I think what's really critical is in the midst of COVID-19, our team members found ways to get patients from all over the world to clinical sites in the middle of the pandemic where the borders were closed. And it was really the issue we had at hand was our patients didn't have luxury of time to wait till post vaccines. So we became really creative. We got US Embassy and country level embassies to give us a waiver to have our patients travel around the world and get them treated. And I think everything at Rocket is all about how do we make personalized care happen for these patients, and how do we make a challenging aspect in their life a bit easier. And I'm so proud of it. And my team motivates me, and it kind of feeds off the energy of the positive on top of the positive.
That's wonderful. And literally illuminating what is happening in that rare disease space is so special. And thank you so much for sharing all of the things that Rocket is doing on behalf of those patients, because it's so needed. Beenu, I'm going to turn to you, and I know your focus is a little bit different, and you're envisioning and transforming on the operational world of clinical trials. Tell us about what your vision is for the future for patients.
Absolutely. Thanks, Taryn. So yeah, my world is envisioning and transforming the operational world of clinical trials by providing the digital trial management suite of technology products. I'm more on the technology side of things. So these products really enable that seamless experience for all stakeholders, not just the sponsor companies or the clinical research sites, but also for the patients, keeping obviously the data privacy in mind. So these technology solutions and products that we build, we really keep in mind the stakeholder experience, what is the user journey of, let's say, a patient. And especially, it becomes so relevant in these pandemic times because that user journey is changing completely for the patients. Patients were coming into clinical research site for clinical trials and for their office visits. All that is not possible anymore because the in-person visits have been curtailed. Hence, really thinking through of what the person who will be using these technology solutions, what their experience will be like, is something that we keep in mind right at the top.
Wonderful. And I think what your vision is so important right now, especially as we move into whatever we want to call it, the next normal, the next stage. And I think we've all recognized that the toothpaste is out of the tube and we can't go back to the way things were. So we have to really forge a new future.
Exactly. Previously it was, as we were going through the COVID situation, it was all about business continuity. How do we make things happen? How do we make clinical trials going on? But now, given that we are coming out of COVID, we really need to envision that world, which is far more improved. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. This is the opportunity for the industry to be really brave and make some bold moves to transform what could be considered a broken healthcare system. Lindsay, I'm going to turn to you now. You, Dr. McNair, trained as a physician, and yet you're now at the top of your game in clinical research. Talk to me about your passion for patients.
So you're right, I trained as a physician, I trained as a general surgeon, and then realized that I liked research better than I liked clinical practice and kind of switched my focus over to research. And I fairly often get asked, but don't you miss practice? Don't you miss taking care of patients? And what I usually say is, I still consider myself to be practicing medicine. I just practice it, and I'm still licensed and everything, but I practice it on a very different scale than I used to. But I think of answering research questions as patient care. If we can do a good clinical trial and a rigorous clinical trial, and we can answer a research question and we can move a potential therapeutic closer to the market for a patient population that needs it, that's patient care to me. And doing those rigorous, well-conducted studies in a way that protects the rights and respects the research participants in them, that's also patient care. So even though we all work in research and development and we don't go to clinics, we don't sit in the same room as a patient with a certain illness, I still think of what we do as part of the overall patient care and driving medicine forward.
I love that idea that research is patient care. I don't think it's ever really looked at that way. And I think it's such an important distinction to make. It's the same way we can look at clinical trials as a care option. And we're moving towards that direction, I think, as an industry in a far more aggressive means. And I don't mean aggressive in a bad way, in an aggressive in a good way, changing the paradigm. Kellie, I'm going to turn to you for a second now. You're in a fairly new role at Bristol Myers Squibb. Talk to me about what you're doing in terms of patient care and patient engagement.
So I think within Bristol Myers Squibb, obviously patients are at the forefront of everything we do, really at the top. And it's been unique for me to join the organization new during COVID. So I haven't actually been in any of our offices yet.
Weird, right?
But I've had a chance, and I've really seen people go outside of the norm to make sure that there's a level of engagement and understanding of the values of the organization. And so I see our leadership really driving towards diversity, inclusion, and equity, and looking at the healthcare disparities that exist and setting a platform where within clinical trials and research and development, we can start to change that dynamic, as well as within our commercial facing group. You know, really being able to make a difference in the way that we work and operate for patients, as well as for our individual team members, looking at areas where there is inequity or disparity and trying to bring forward platforms that address that. It's a commitment from all levels of our organization and part of our goals on an individual basis for all team members. So for me, that's been something that I think within the industry, we have an opportunity to be agents of change. And across our leadership teams, I think no matter what the role is, there's always an opportunity to bring forward a different focus and a different view that will help elevate healthcare access worldwide and even within our communities.
Kellie, what you bring up is such an important point. And I think if there's, we look all the time for those silver linings out of COVID-19 amongst all the tragedy. And one of the silver linings for me is shining that light on the inequity of health within this country. And so the work that you're doing in terms of DE&I is so important as we look to elevate that patient voice even further and make sure that those patients who are in need of those therapies are getting them despite their zip code, right? Doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter where they live. Peyton, I'm going to have you round us out. You've always had a focus on the patient. In fact, before joining Parexel, you launched one of the very first patient reimbursement programs. To say you were ahead of the curve is not an understatement. Now you're building a bridge between research and commercialization. How does this help patients? Because the two have to meet somewhere on the road.
They do. And honestly, that's what inspired me to join and really to flip to this side of it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the constant theme in Kellie's comments were perfect, right? In that we really have to focus on addressing all patient access issues and looking at it holistically. And we can make a tremendous difference through clinical research in that area. And I've been very fortunate since joining Parexel. One of my first initiatives was really to relook at our strategy. And we ended up pivoting our entire strategy to be on the patient as the core. It's also one of our core values. So it's very clear, if you don't know what to do, it's absolutely, aligned to that patient. And having done that ahead of COVID, honestly, turned out to be, a wonderful, cultural transformation for us, because I think it did help us with the silver linings, Taryn, that you just mentioned, to be able to pivot very quickly as a company. Obviously, all of our clinical trials needed to adapt related to the pandemic in order to keep them moving. Many of our clinical trials, particularly in oncology, are a patient's only care option. So there was clear urgency from that perspective. And then we're also involved with literally over 100 different parts of studies related to COVID-19 itself. So there's urgency across the board. And I do think the patient has been central to us. And in fact, we keep really growing that. As you know, Taryn, we just announced a new role, a Chief Patient Officer, and Claire Grace has joined our organization in that role. And that's really helping us build on that foundation of patient innovation and really take that to the next level, including clinical trial diversity, which Kellie just mentioned. So it's an exciting time where I do feel like the worlds of patient access and reimbursement and clinical research are all coming together so we can focus on patient access to care.
I agree with you. I think this is an incredible time of excitement within the R&D realm, because there are so many possibilities and we're looking at so many different things to move the needle on patient care. But at the same time, and you all are agents of change, as Lindsay said, you all have the opportunity to impact what happens to the future. But maintaining equilibrium during research and development can be hard, because R&D is hard. There are a lot of ups and downs. And as leaders of teams, I'd like to know, how do you keep your teams on on a steady path and manage those expectations, because it's easy to get downtrodden if a drug doesn't make it through a milestone. If you lose a patient in a clinical trial, it's tough stuff that you're doing. Lindsay, I'm going to ask you, what are things that you're doing to keep your teams buoyed when things aren't going so great? And then how do you celebrate those successes? So you got to get that positive part in there too.
So one of the things that I would say is, as you just mentioned, sometimes when a study doesn't have the outcome that you hoped for, there's a lot of discouragement on the team that's worked on that project for so long, which is totally natural. People have put, years sometimes into the development of a product or a certain clinical study and really want it to show that it's successful and safe and effective and all of the good things that will move it forward. And sometimes that's not the outcome. And one of the phrases that we hear sometimes that I really dislike is that we have clinical trial failures. Because to me, if something is a negative clinical study result, but it was a rigorous clinical trial, it was well conducted, it gave us a clear answer as to whether or not this investigational product did what we hoped it would do, that is a successful trial, regardless of whether it's the answer that we had hoped it would be, because it still helps to move us forward. It helps us to decide whether more resources go into that class of drugs. It helps us decide how to tweak the next study design so that we can come up with a better study drug regimen. But I think one of the things to do always with development teams is to remind them that as long as we're doing good work and rigorous work and ethical work, we are still moving the field forward, even if the results are not what we hoped they would be from our individual studies.
Lindsay, I think that is spot on, because words matter, right? So
Yes.
By calling something a failure, it really can be dejecting to the team. But in fact, it was a success. If, as you said, if all of those
it answers the question.
Absolutely. And that's now a path that other folks don't have to travel down as well. So that's another additive success to that. That's fantastic. Thank you for bringing that up. I love that point. Kinnari, I'm going to ask you, what are some of the things that you do, especially for your team? And you started off with a very small team. In fact, you were one of the 4 people sitting around a conference table before Rocket got to where it is. So you've seen it all the way through.
Oh my God, yes, from 4 to over 100. And we went from an idea that we had of a potential license for one and done curative gene therapy to now having 5 programs in the clinic. And I have to tell you, there have been lots of ups and downs. The good thing is we're so intimately involved with every patient's treatment. We know every lab still to this day, because we're a small company and we're a small team that's so devoted. But with that, as you could imagine, there are some challenging times when labs or some things happen and you're always kind of worried. It feels like a roller coaster. One of the things, the advice that I give to our team and to myself at times, because I need it as well, my own pep talk, is this. We're doing something amazing. If we can figure out how to make the science, the brilliant science we've seen and the proof of concept we've seen preclinically and clinically in few patients, if we can do this for all of these patients, that's amazing. If we can do this for most of these patients, that's even a bigger impact than we could have ever made. So we've really focused on the fact that science will win at the end of the day. We have to be true to the data that we see and make decisions based on science, data, and caring about each aspect. And when we don't know something, we bring experts around the table. When we have downs, one of our patients, for example, had a challenging moment. We brought all of the KOLs that we knew that can help us through that situation. And the patient ended up doing great afterwards. But with those 1 to 2 days, it was all about, let's figure out how to help this patient. The one thing that makes it slightly easier is we are seeing great clinical proof of concept in 4 of our 4 clinical studies, but we are actually trying to motivate and celebrate the wins by having patients be treated and their stories be shared directly, not just with our community of individuals working at Rocket Pharmaceuticals and our research and scientists, but also the third-party CDMOs and CROs that we work with. We bring patients and their families over to share with us and teach us their learnings of what they appreciated through the clinical study, what was a struggle that we need to improve on, and what impact we can make in their lives. And I think ups and downs in drug development unfortunately do happen. As our panelists are saying, it's really about trying to do the right thing for every patient, and remembering that sometimes a failure may teach us a bigger thing that could help hundreds and thousands of patients in the future. So I think we just have to know we're trying to do our best, and that's okay at times.
And you're right, as long as everybody's doing their best, and there are going to be failures and there are going to be ups. And I like that idea that there's some transparency there and that you're sharing those data points. And it's about some of those metrics that are so important to be able to follow. And I know, Peyton, for you, that is one of the things that's core to your philosophy, and identifying those metrics and not be afraid of them, because they do tell a story. So tell us what's happening with you at Parexel in terms of the area and how you're managing your ups and your downs.
Yeah, you're right. Metrics are important. I mean, certainly for me personally, one of my lessons learned has definitely been the value of performance capital on an individual level. But I think we're now seeing that through a crisis and an organizational level. And nothing like a crisis, right, to make us really learn what matters in the end. And some of the things that are harder to measure have really mattered through this pandemic. Passion and transparency, as we were really obviously facing a need to have all of our colleagues respond in new ways, work differently, and in agile structure through clinical research is a challenge. So first and foremost, showing, how much we care, right? Caring for our patients, but caring for each other, recognizing and rewarding frontline teams. We actually created ways to celebrate our frontline personnel as they were keeping clinical research moving. And it was, honestly, it's humbling, right? To see the efforts of our colleagues and the things they've done throughout the past year has just been amazing. And I think when you put that all together, it does come back to transparency, not being afraid to embrace those metrics and hold yourself accountable to them. And also through a pandemic, really making sure that we show empathy and care for each other. And I certainly have learned how important that is, right? We're not physically together with our teams, and we have to be intentional in reaching out to each other and making sure people know how much their hard work is truly appreciated and how much is making a difference for patients.
Absolutely. And Peyton, you touched on something there about the empathy piece of it. And through our last two panels, that has been a common thread too. So empathy used to be considered one of those softer skills that was maybe not so embraced by the, men of the day. I hate to say it that way, but it has become a leadership skill that has to be relearned in these days right now that we're all living in. I'm going to turn to you, Beenu. I know that you are a passionate leader, you are action-oriented, and that you are not afraid to challenge the status quo. But at the same time, you have to manage the expectations of your team. So how are you doing that right now?
So, the philosophy that I go in with is I have to be in the trenches with the team. You can't be one of those leaders who are sitting at a pedestal and looking down on the team. I truly believe that showing the team members that you are part of the team and really trying to achieve collectively as a group and making the things go forward. Because, technology, as long as it works, it's a great thing. But there are times when technology does not work, and that really puts a heavy test on the team. So being there with the team, cheering them on, be that cheerleader, and kind of understanding that there are unknowns which we have to deal with, and try to find what is the best path forward. If all the risks and mitigations that you had thought of did not pan out and we are dealing with an issue, really being with the team together is something that I feel is how I contribute.
That's fabulous. And it is about that team contribution, and it's about getting down there and working alongside. I love that. And Kellie, you've had a really successful career. How do you keep your teams motivated and successful in their pursuit of sometimes some pretty big goals?
Yeah, I think it's important that the team understands what the ultimate goals are, and that along the way, the team celebrates the successes and understands that where there was a miss, the rationale and the reason behind it, because oftentimes there's a very good reason. When we're working in clinical research, we have to set an even higher standard than patient care, because we're conducting research. So we have to bring a much higher ethical standard forward. And many times that will change the approach that we take and change it for a very important reason. So I think part of that is making sure that the team really understands and is willing to raise their hand when they see an issue immediately. I also think right now with the challenges of COVID, folks working from home and having their children at home trying to do school, there is a needed level of flexibility that may not have been part of the workforce or expected previously that we really have to bring forward. And we have to make sure that we're creating opportunities for people to do their work differently now, so that we can still maintain the level of success. And that requires a willingness to hear from our team and ensure that our teams are raising kind of that personal level of challenge, because chances are other folks are actually feeling the same thing. So I know we've tried to set up our meeting structures a little bit different so that there is time at the beginning and the end, so that we're not just back-to-back meetings. I think that's a big difference. We've also taken quiet days and things like that so that we can try and pull back from the meeting so that people can really do that focus and strategy and delivery of activities. And we've worked to provide other supports across the organization, which I think have been very important. And I know other organizations are doing the same. So I think it's that listening and really watching for where individuals need that support from the leadership team and being ready to be there for them.
That's awesome. And do you think that this will be extended post-COVID? I don't know what the future holds. I don't think anybody does, but will we ever go back to the way things were before? Will we all jump on a plane to go have a 30-minute meeting again? Will it be this hybrid of work at home, work in the office? Will there be maintained flexibility? So I'd love to hear from all of you in terms of what your organizations are and your thoughts about what the future state is for folks. And again, some of those clinical trends that you're tracking. So I'll leave it with you, Kellie. Let's dive in.
Yeah, so I think we have a new future. I think we have a silver lining that has come forward from this pandemic, that we have new ways of working. We have found that we can be successful, we can deliver in this space. And I think there's some really great opportunities that we shouldn't let go of as we move forward. I also think that we're going to find that there's even more we can do differently. I think people are craving the opportunities to come back together in person. So I think we will bring that back, but I think it will be a mix. Even before COVID, there were meetings that were rolling out with virtual platforms. Mm-hmm. I think we have opportunities to really grow that and do combination of in-person and platform technology. I also think when we look at healthcare, there's tremendous leveraging of virtual visits that can be brought forward and remain, that will make it easier for patients to access care on an ongoing basis. And I'll turn it over to my esteemed colleagues on this panel for more thought.
Yeah, thanks, I can jump in.
Please.
Yeah. So, when I look back at the year, one thing that has been proven, that the productivity can be achieved by these remote workers and really leveraging the technology to make that collaboration work. But I think it's not going to be one or the other. We will probably land up in the middle in a hybrid situation, because truly, I think one thing which I'm feeling that and hearing, at least from the technology partners that we work with, that innovation which comes about by people standing around the water cooler and really talking, feeding off of each other, I think that is something which is missing. So at least the way we are thinking about it is, how do we come up with at least 1 day a week or 1 day in 2 weeks where the teams can come together. They don't have to be 5 days, 9 to 5 or whatever, 8 to 6. They don't have to be in the offices, but really come up with a few days so that the teams get that in-person time. So that's the approach, I think, that in between a hybrid is what I'm thinking. And at least leaders that I'm talking to are thinking would be an ideal way to land.
I get you. I think it's going to be both too, which is both exciting and exhausting if you think about it, because now it's not just one or the other. Now you have to do both. Lindsay, what are the things that you're seeing over in your organization?
So I would say in our organization, it's a question that we're still struggling with, is what it's going to look like afterwards. But I think we have both people who are saying, please don't make me go back and work in the offices again. But we also have people who are saying, when can I go back and work in the offices again? Who do miss that face-to-face. Maybe they're just trying to get away from their children, but they do miss that face-to-face connection and that ability to just, have people to talk to and have people to brainstorm with and people to ask a quick question of, which is possible, but a little more difficult to do when you're in a virtual environment. But I think also the days of kind of just flying across the country for meetings, when we've shown how easily we can do those things virtually, it's going to be much harder to justify the lost time and the expense of a lot of the travel that we used to do.
I was going to say, do you all, and we'll get to this, do you feel that you can be more productive now rather than before? And that can be, because the demands on your time at home are also different, but at the same time, you're not in the airport for 2 hours beforehand, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll get into that. But Kinnari, talk to us about what's happening with your organization and how you're managing all of this.
Definitely. I think one of the things I can just say off of the travel component, I used to be on the road 60% of the month. So it was always airports to hotels all over US and Europe all the time. Definitely don't miss all the hotel rooms and all of that. But I have to say there's a balance, right? What we realize is a lot of these meetings we could do virtually, but there is a component of relationship building. The amount of activities you get done of meeting somebody for lunch, coffee, over a drink, and the bond you build there, it just ends up being something different than what you could do on a Zoom call, right? So I think technology, it's a great way. Last year taught us how to infuse that into it so we can become a better versions of ourselves, right? So we can do both things in the ideal way. But at Rocket Pharmaceuticals, our team, being a small company of less than 100, or now a little bit over 100, we were all a family-oriented, one family culture. So our team actually, from July onwards, was like, we want to be back. So we made both of our sites, amped up the safety, the temp controls, the cleaning services to 2 to 3 times a day in order to make sure it's safe as possible for team members who wanted to come back. Our essential team members, which is 60% of our team, have been on site every day except for 1 week in midst of COVID-19 in summer timeframe of last year. But essential team members are there every single day. Non-essential team members, we get so many emails saying, I want to come on site. So we try to rotate so we can maximize people's desire to want to spend time with each other in a safe way. But also some team members are like, hey, I have kids, I have dogs. I really need to come into work to be more effective. Give us a place to come in. So we've kind of figured out a way where we have team members rotating. So I go into the office 2 to 3 days a week with the team and we rotate around. So I think there is not going to be the 100% in your desk at 9 to 5 kind of a job that most traditional corporate America did have, but we're trying to figure out our balance. Our team tends to want to spend time together a lot. We love spending time with each other. The idea is we get together, as Beenu said, in water cooler conversations or just hallway discussions are just a lot more efficient than 1 hour Zoom or Teams meeting. So we're figuring it out. Our big initiative before was COVID-19 task force to maintain our team's safety first and foremost, and we used to do a lot with that. Now our task force is how to have the new normal become a reality for Rocket. And so we started a task force across different team members being representatives of the labs, manufacturing, R&D, and G&A organization to figure out what does it look like for Rocket.
And 1 year in, we've moved from task force now to the new normal, what that's going to look like, which is mind-blowing because at the beginning we thought, oh, it'll be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and now we're into month number 12, which is incredible. And yet we've all found a way, right? That's what's so amazing. Peyton, you were a road warrior as well. So being grounded for you has to feel a little strange. And at the same time, giving you the opportunity to stretch in different ways as well. So talk to us about what you're doing at Parexel.
Yeah, absolutely. And such great comments from the group. And I was pretty much 100% travel as well. So it's a fairly dramatic shift. And I do think we're going to be looking at a hybrid, like the other folks spoke about. And I like using that word because hybrid and optionality is not just what we're seeing for ourselves and our company, but I think it's also what we're seeing in terms of clinical research being the new normal.
Awesome.
When you think about all the decentralized clinical trials, patients want choice. And I think that's going to be the future, is looking at optionality that meets patients where they are. And I think that's what we need to do for our colleagues internally as well. So that's one of the big areas of change I think that we're seeing in particular. And it is a silver lining, I think, of COVID, in that we are being able to be very effective in terms of how much we're able to get done, which thank goodness, because the bolus of work that's come at us all in this area is unbelievable, and what we're accomplishing is unbelievable. But at the same time, I do appreciate the comments that we do miss physically being together, and I think we'll have to find ways to be intentional with that and kind of take the best of both worlds that we've been living in. And that's what I'd like to see applied to clinical research too. Certainly, we're committed to no going back, absolutely. And Kellie, I agree. I think we'll find even more innovations together, speed, efficiencies, but also the ways to bring all patients to the table as well.
Thank you, Peyton. That brings us back to that point about that hybrid approach and decentralized clinical trials, and making that trial experience about the patient more so and more purposefully than it has been in the past. And this is an opportunity, as we said before, for the industry to really step forward and be bold and take some calculated risks in terms of what it wants to do and what it wants to be in the future. So I love that. We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that we have save some time for questions at the end. This has been such a robust conversation. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round, and ask, aside from decentralized clinical trials, what's the one trend in clinical research you're tracking right now? And then we're going to get to your wow moments. So I'm going to start with you, Lindsay.
So I would say the one trend that we're seeing a lot is creativity in clinical study design. I have said many times, I think the old phase 1 is safety in healthy volunteers. Phase 2 is when you start looking at efficacy. Phase 3, that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 model is really outdated for what we're looking at now. And some of the new therapeutic innovations that we're working with that just don't fit that type of development with personalized medicine and therapies for rare diseases and things like that. So I think creativity and study design around master protocols, but also expansion cohorts and early looks at efficacy is really one of the big trends that we're seeing.
You go. I love that. Thank you. Beenu, I'm going to turn to you.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So from technology point of view, digital transformation is the trend that we are seeing. And so when we talk about digital transformation, it is that buzzword, which means a lot of different things to different people, right? Sometimes it is used to mean using that latest technology, the social media, the mobile, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. And sometimes it really means really working and using it in the context of design thinking. So, but truly, it is all inclusive. And what we are seeing, the huge trend of building products and solutions that are really leveraging the data that gets collected, the business processes, and that user experience, really bringing all of these together to really build a resilient ecosystem to bring about those improved business outcomes.
Go transform us, lady. I'm all up for it. So now I'm going to change. Kellie, I'm just go around the horn. So Kellie, what are you tracking right now?
Yeah, so I think we have opportunities to leverage data differently, and I think it aligns with both what Lindsay and Beenu are talking about is that in some ways it's technology that brings us platforms that we can leverage the data differently, but in other places it is that protocol design where we're using existing available databases as an arm within a clinical trial. So we have opportunities to tap into more real world data in a different way, and also engage fewer patients as we go forward to carry the efficacy and safety analysis using existing data. I think that's one of the bigger trends I expect to see transform our industry in the coming years.
Thank you so much. That is fantastic insights. And Peyton, I already took decentralized clinical trials, so now I'm going to force you to think of another one.
I'm ready. I'm going to build on Kellie's because I think the trend that we really do need to talk about is real world evidence. The next generation and use of RWE is finally, I hope here. Obviously that's my old world in terms of reimbursement and access. Now we're seeing actual clinical research using synthetic control arms based on RWE in pivotal trials. And I think honestly for us, that's been probably one of the most exciting parts of our year this year, is seeing that transformation and seeing that happen globally. So I think Kellie is spot on with that.
That's fantastic. And that RWE it's a new concept based on an old promise, right? So while we think that it's all new, it's really based on great science and pharmacovigilance and pharmacology. So it's based in that science. So that's fabulous. And Kinnari, you are going to take us home with the trend.
For us, it's patients first. So talking to patients even before having a single clinical study be designed, talking to patients and treating physicians to understand what's important to them. So our phase 1 studies were designed based on 2 prior years of involvement with patients, patient advocacies, and their physicians to figure out what's important to them. We even take patients and our KOLs to health authority meetings with us. Because these diseases are so rare, we want to make sure the context of the totality of the disease is well understood. And to me, that's the exciting part of the new trend. It's not just engaging patients at phase 3 or commercialization. It's getting them involved before even starting a study.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Those are great insights. And some of the questions that are in the queue address some of these areas that were talked about. So we're going to get to them. So we're going to do a quick, again, round robin and talk about your WOW moments because it is our WOW virtual event. And I'll start with you, Kinnari, since you're right there. And then we'll go back around the horn and end with Lindsay. So Kinnari, go for it.
My WOW moment is meeting the first patient that we treated in our gene therapy. And the little girl, she came to visit us, and what she said and how she can now live a normal life and can dream about being 16 and live past her teenage years into adulthood. That to me was probably one of the most moving experiences. It made all the hard work, dedication, and the research that has gone on to make this therapy available for the patient over the last 20 years. Just completely a breathtaking moment.
That is a WOW moment. That is amazing. And congratulations to you. And wow, what a heartfelt moment. Peyton?
Yep. My WOW moment definitely relates to managerial courage. I've seen that in my past, and I've seen it certainly now through a pandemic. And that's then when you're facing a challenge that doesn't look like one that the team can overcome together, explaining the why it's so important, the meaning and the impact it'll have on patients, and then just being amazed at what you can do together when you're aligned on the impact you can make.
I love that managerial courage. And as Sharon Callahan said earlier, courage is a muscle you need to flex. So that's amazing. Kellie?
Yeah, so I think that there's so many WOW moments, and I feel that there are opportunities each and every week where you can see a colleague, a investigator, a patient present kind of an opportunity to you, something you hadn't thought about in that way, and help carry forward the work that you're doing. So I have a little necklace that I got from a 12-year-old who lost her mother to cancer, and I keep it with me for kind of important things to just carry forward that thought and that idea that this is who we're working for. We're working for that little girl and all of the families of our patients.
And the word on that is so important, hope. So thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. Beenu?
I hate to go after that moment.
I know.
But anyway.
Sorry, Beenu.
So when I think about my wow moment, I started my career in information technology, IT, after completing my MS in computer science. Now, the IT field is vast, and one can spend this whole career kind of getting consumed in a specific technical specialization area. But for me, destiny had something else in mind that really changed the trajectory of my career. I got an opportunity to pursue an MBA, executive MBA, after spending approximately 10 years of my life in IT. That really opened my eyes. It opened my eyes to a completely new, non-technical world, the world of business strategy, finance, sales and marketing. And I was in love, in awe with this business world. So this made me jump from that clinical IT into the business world and managing the clinical trials, because of which I genuinely understand and live by the phrase, do not do technology for the sake of technology. So looking back, I feel my executive MBA was the moment that really changed the shape of my career, and I would classify that as my wow moment.
And to make that leap too, and to make that career change, that's very brave. Not everybody is willing to do that and step out of their comfort zone. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Lindsay?
I think mine is actually a little bit similar to Beenu's. Mine was very early in my career, and as I mentioned, I trained initially as a general surgeon. And when I was reaching I'd spent 5 years in residency and a research fellowship. And as I was reaching the end of that and starting to think toward my career as a practicing general surgeon, I was having more and more trouble picturing myself in that career. And really kind of somewhat slowly came to the realization that I didn't want to end up as a practicing general surgeon. It just wasn't where I could see myself for the rest of my life. But I had spent so long working toward that, and there's no concept of career counseling in medical school. You are going to become a clinician, and that's kind of the only direction you're pointed in. And when I really thought about it, I just kind of suddenly came to the realization that even though I've spent 5 years moving toward this goal, I don't have to do this anymore. I can do something else, and I don't really know what the something else is going to be yet, but I can step off of this pathway and do something else that I want to do with my life that will make me happier than the direction that I'm currently going in. And that's that ended up, I didn't know at the time, being working for a little biotech company. And moving into pharma-based drug development, and then getting my master's in research ethics and moving into a research ethics role. And I think it's made me much happier than that practicing general surgery career would have. But the wow moment was kind of saying, I can do something else, even though I don't know what the something else is going to be yet.
Again, incredibly brave to be able to take that leap. Incredible. Thank you all so much for everything that you have shared with us today. Now I'd like to share some things with you from our audience, if you don't mind, and I'm going to put you all in the hot seat. One of the questions that really tickled me was, do you think that the newfound flexible working from the flexible working conditions will continue? Well, let me start again. How do you think the pandemic will support? I'm sorry, it keeps shifting, and my eyes will not go that fast. Does the panel think that the newfound flexible working from the pandemic will support women to achieve career goals? We've seen study after study come out how more women are exiting the workforce. So what impact do we think this is going to have on women in general? And what are you all doing in your companies to support women so that we don't see a mass exodus? And whoever wants to start, raise their hand and jump in.
I'll jump in real quick. I'm certainly very optimistic that this is going to be a positive for women in particular, but I think for parents in particular as well, more broadly, flexibility, reducing things that really were face time. Right. I think that would be just a huge win for everyone to remove that piece, of kind of the daily life and really be able to more focus on these kind of ways to connect using technology as well as being together. So I'm very optimistic, and we need to keep women in the workforce, particularly in healthcare. The majority are women, and so we will have a huge setback beyond just career paths. We'll have a setback for our industry.
Fantastic. Kinnari, go ahead.
I think the way we're thinking about it is work-life integration. It's no longer work-life balance. How do we integrate both aspects of our lives together in a seamless fashion? So I think having more leadership around each of the companies sit and say, hey, what does our workforce need? What do our team need? And how can be their best? And how do we elevate them to be their optimal in both aspects of life? Because I think that will help us achieve success. And COVID-19 has showed us this is possible.
Fantastic. Yes, go ahead, Lindsay.
Sorry, just quick to add, I think some of that too is going to have to be that women have to also say what they need from those workforces. Earlier this year, we realized, and it took a while to realize, that having an 8 a.m. meeting was really difficult for some of the people on our team because it was the same time they had to get their kids started in virtual school. And it was a very easy thing to shift that to an 8:15 or an 8:30 start. But we didn't realize that it was a conflict for people because they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to make a big deal of it. But it was a very easy thing to accommodate. So I think part of it's going to be people needing to say, can we move this meeting, or this is a conflict for me, so we can make those adjustments people need.
Exactly. I think what COVID has shown us, that balance which is needed both for women who are taking care of their kids and pursuing the career, and also on the corporate side, the leaders and the team members, that balance to make things work can be achieved without really negatively impacting the productivity. If that people are able to come to terms with, I think, the challenges that women were facing in raising their voice probably will be a lot more simpler now. So I have a lot of hope in the future of work.
That's fantastic. Well, let's be optimistic, and I like that. One of the other questions that came in is, Peyton, you mentioned that Parexel just hired its first chief patient officer. Do you all think that this chief patient officer role will become more common in life sciences companies to ensure that patients remain the primary focus? We have about 2 minutes left, so I'd like to hear from all of you, if you don't mind.
Real quickly, I'll just say definitely, and you have a great article on this, actually, Taryn, in the most recent PharmaVOICE, so I think it's fantastic. We're seeing it in biotech companies, and I think we're the first CRO to have it, but I expect we'll see others quickly.
That's fantastic. Yes, Kellie.
Yeah, I agree. I also think we'll see more innovative platforms that allow patients to engage with clinical trials as we go forward.
Wonderful. Kinnari, do you all have a chief patient officer, or is that your role too?
We have a team member who serves as a similar role to that, but we have a person focused just on patient advocacy and helping patients through clinical studies. And I think that is such an important role, and it's making a big difference. So I absolutely see the value of this.
Fantastic. So I think we have time for one more question, and let me grab it. It referenced the quiet days. And I think that was you, Kellie, right? Are they one-off, or is it for the whole department? How does that work for you?
So we've established it departmentally, but we also have an initiative from the top of our organization to carve out meeting-free Fridays, Friday afternoons. So everyone's working towards that. I don't think we've achieved it just yet, but we're really trying to carve out that time and change the way that we are scheduling all of these virtual sessions.
That's fantastic. Is everybody else doing something similar or striving towards that goal as well?
For me, we are striving towards it. Definitely feel the need for it, but striving towards it.
Listen, as long as there's forward momentum, right, then that's all good.
Exactly.
I can't thank you all enough for being part of this panel. It was a great conversation, and really I've taken so many notes in terms of what to look forward to as far as trends go, and how you all are managing your teams during this COVID-19 pandemic, as well as your great patient insights. So I thank you so much to all of you. Thanks to our attendees and our fellow WoW podcast members who are part of the audience. And I want to thank our sponsors, BioForum, Greenfire, Karyopharm Therapeutics, W2O, and WCG. Before we head to the lounge, and I hope the audience will join us there with some of our esteemed panelists to continue the conversation, I'd like to leave you with this thought, and it's from Ginny Rometty, CEO of IBM. Your value will not be what you know, it will be what you share. And today you have all shared such value with all of us that you have my eternal thanks for that. So thank you so much. And I would ask our audience members and our panelists to head over to the lounge. I believe the instructions are on the screen. You just have to click and we'll see you there. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.